at the point of recruitment, most companies understand that they'll have to train the candidates, which means that everything the candidate is not going to bring to the table. For that training, people look at potential. Potential means, do they have the ability of comprehending complex domains and subjects? I started designing for softwares in 2003, and that was a time that, especially in India, nobody had heard about something called software design. So my first job was in 2003 in Japan, and I was working with a company called Soft Device, and they were doing this kind of work, user experience work, without me knowing that's what I was doing. And that was the first time I was handed over the Don Norman book that please read this and what is usability and things about that. And I spent all my evenings and nights, I used to stay in a dome there in Japan because it's very expensive. And I used to sit there and read that entire book again and again. From there, then working with consulting organizations, human factors, I used to work for them. Pretty much from scratch of my career, I worked with them. And all kinds of roles, actual designer roles, from their project manager role, from their project director role, then group lead role, from there becoming the VP of the entire India, the operations. So the entire Pondicherry and the Mumbai operations for the entire company was reporting to me. From there, because my interest in understanding the subject, understanding clients, and understanding this business also was deeper, I also took on the sales work as well. So I was leading the technical side of the team, but also responsible for sales delivery. Beyond that, also, they were into training. So one of the things which someone briefly talked about was that I've done about almost 200 plus programs I delivered personally. That also came out of that because I was into training and education for a very long time. Having done that, consulting is still on the side where you are giving advice, right? You're giving deliverables and advice. From there, I moved to pay-you payments, where I was doing more of a product role, where you have to build the product end-to-end, different kinds of roles, from innovation roles to execution roles, building teams for both of these different kinds of areas, building credit products, building payment products, all kinds of different things were done over there as well. So I was VP with this company as well, but with a different kind of mandate as well. Once this breadth and depth of experience was there with me, both in consulting as well as product, and also having built teams of all scale sides, also having done sales in different sites, is when I started my own company. The reason I'm telling you this is that one of the things people talk about starting a company is that, I can do design or I can deliver services, I can charge for those services, let me start doing that. See, building a business is a lot more than that. Building a business is to understand how a business needs to be constructed and is economically viable. And that only happens when you have breadth of experience. Otherwise, you pretty much end up being a freelancer on that. So that is a variety of things that I did. Up till 2006, in India, the demand was not strong because it was a pull-based market. What that means is customers will come to the service because the service itself is that desirable. So if you want to actually use your bank, you have to go to the bank, you have to go to bank branch because your money is there. Your motivation is much higher as a customer. So the bank's motivation to also invest money in providing better experiences is very low. Then 2006 or 2007 onwards, we started doing projects in India in this area, but at that time it was only called usability engineering. There was nothing called user experience. Practically just making softwares easier to use or they're accessible. That was the only role. There was no business angle to it, there was no experience angle to that as well. Then the world changed. In 2008, the iPhone was launched. And for the first time, there was a mass distribution system of well-designed softwares across the world. And when that happened, a lot of companies actually became rich overnight. In fact, one of my faculties in New York, his name was Igor Pusenjak. And this gentleman used to teach me Cold Fusion. So Cold Fusion is a Microsoft language, which is a backend language. At that time also, this language was a redundant language. And he's like, I have no idea why I'm teaching you this. I'm going to stop teaching. So we asked him, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to become an iPhone app developer. So he left all that. And by the end of the semester, he was starting his own company called Lima Sky. And he made a game called Doodle Jump. I don't know if you guys know about this. Okay, so it's a slightly older generation, but he became a millionaire overnight. It's a pretty famous game and still out there. You can Google it, Doodle Jump. And this realization came to many companies that if you design things well and if you make fantastic experiences, companies make a lot of money. Previously, for the company to make a lot of money, you had to have a big building, you had to have a lot of brick and mortar, you have to have a lot of manpower for you to be Jindals and Tatas to be able to make money. But now, because this mass distribution system called a phone, your services could just be put in a package of code and you can send it anywhere, and the scale of the economy tipped. You could have companies like Uber. Before mobile phone and this distribution, there was no possibility of doing that. So that happened. And there these companies realized there's something called design and they need that. So user experience as a field picked up and they started demanding that. In India, then around this time, a lot of pickup happened. In fact, 2010 end or 2011, I came back to India because of my personal reasons. And then at that point, demand had started to pick up, where different banks and financial companies and telecommunication companies and e-commerce companies. In fact, I've worked with almost all of these, all the banks, HDFC, Axis, ICICI, some tier 2 banks also, all your Airtel, Vodafone, Vodacom, work with all of those guys, work with all the e-commerce, Snapdeal, etc., Flipkart, we work with that. We did work on that. The demand then had started. Then the demand went higher up, where the era went from just website-based commerce to then mobile-based commerce. So it increased to that point as well. The nature of the field, what had become, to be honest to you, while it's called user experience, predominantly what people were creating was just UI. The output is what? Screens at the end of it. Everybody was making screens. The challenge now the field is facing at this point is that you cannot be paid just to be a screen creator. Because now these are penny a piece. There are now boot camps generating screen creators. That versus an academy creating screen creators. That is a question that people are asked. Why pay a premium here versus you can get somebody cheaper over there? That becomes a question as well. So the field now is transforming as well, because the way AI and other technologies are coming together, it is no longer about just building apps. There's a lot of app fatigue with customers also, which means now customers expect that you design full service experiences for us and not just individual apps and expect us to come over there. We will come and do little bits of things with your service at when and how we want to do it. So that requires a lot of intelligence, how to craft this entire experience. And then we obviously create some UI in between here and there. But it's not just UI, you have to create many kinds of experiences. So you're an orchestrator or you're a magician of experiences across all these different touch points. That is what designers need to have to do today. And one of the points I wanted the community to also understand, that you're no longer in the business of UI generation. What you do is you create customer behaviors that create business outcomes. That's what you do. And that distinction is massive, because then it doesn't matter. Even tomorrow Figma goes away, or tomorrow this UI as ability goes away because no one's using mobile phones anywhere. But as far as this is your ability and understanding, you can do it with something else. This transition, I think over the next 10 years will happen. I think UI will still remain relevant for next 10 years. We are thinking that AI will wipe it out. I don't think that's going to be true. At least 10 years, there's going to be enough UI work, but slowly, this is going to change one way or the other. So yeah, students need to prepare. We assume that designers by a certain label will do the same thing agnostic of the company they join. That's not true. If I say a graphic designer at one company versus the next, do absolutely different things. Same way user experience work. In some companies, user experience designers are doing just DTP jobs, where they're generating screens because the product manager comes and sketches and say, convert this into visuals by tomorrow. In some companies, they are doing more research work and they're coming up with insights. Some other companies, they are the ones who are working with management and determining the direction of what the product is supposed to be. In some companies, they are more visual design focused. So there's a lot of variety in this field also in what the landscape is, which means when people actually go and look for an organization to join, the first thing they need to understand is, what am I really going to do there? Forget the title, park the title for some time. What is the actual work? What do you want me to do? When they describe that, that is what has to be seen, whether that is to like me or not. What do I want to see myself doing for the next 5 years? If not, then don't. Don't assume that UI UX is going to be same exactly in every single company. It's very different. Currently, largely recruiters are looking for UI skills. Let's be honest. people's value for research is very less. They may ask people that, have you conducted research, have you designed? But on the reality on the ground, there's very little research which is being happened. Fundamentally, they will go after UI skills. Then after that, they will say, as part of user experience, can you do mind mapping? Can you do some of the research? Those are bells and whistles on top of that. But at the point of recruitment, most companies understand that they'll have to train the candidates, which means that everything the candidate is not going to bring to the table. Now, for that training, people look at potential. Potential means, do they have the ability of comprehending complex domains and subjects and understanding requirements and translating those requirements to compelling outputs? If you can't understand the domain, what will you make? If you can't understand the requirements being given to you by your manager, what will you make? Because the ability of making the design only comes towards the end. The challenge in the design field is the moment designer is given, okay, let's start with this, they start immediately making some design. Design is actually only 50% of the job. The 50% before that is all of these different things. And they have to demonstrate that ability. Can they understand the domain? Can they understand requirements? Then they're effective people who can participate. The other thing also people nowadays look at potential fitment, which means, and this is a perception with the younger generation, that they will not stick around. So if they're easily riled up or they're not centered in the way they think, for example, right? Then recruiters think that, okay, 3 months down the line, they will start having challenges. They will not face the adversity of an entirely new subject, an entirely new company very well. These are the basic things that recruiters look at. Nothing more in depth and fancy beyond this. Everything else will come as part of the learning. See, if designers want to compete against each other, the number one skill is your communication ability. And I always talk about these examples with any of the classes I teach, that when I entered the job market, I could not present to save my life because of my schooling and how Indian schooling tends to be. Indian schooling tends to kill your confidence, number one. Then secondly, it tends to kill your thinking abilities because it's a very rote learning kind of thing. And if you ask a question in class, why did you ask the question? Sit down. Right? Because of that, the brain, when it enters the job market, it struggles because you are expected to present your work. That becomes difficult. So even in classrooms, when you ask people that, okay, why don't you stand up and present? Who would like to present? Then people are like, I don't want to present. Why is that? Because of the legacy of the education which comes in this country. And these skills not being valued at that level. But these are fundamental skills which differentiate. Because design is a communication field. I'll tell you why. Somebody, even the conversation today was giving that example. The only person who knows that your design is good is you. So when you go in front of CEOs and they say, okay, do you like this? That's the wrong question, right? Because if they knew what was good or bad, they would not be asking you. So then your ability of selling the right thing, or what I call design selling, is entirely on your communication ability. So the biggest competitive edge actually for people is that, because everything else is basic hygiene, is commodity skills. Everybody else is going to come with Figma. Everybody else is going to talk about process. Everybody else is going to talk about, oh, look at my portfolio. Everybody's portfolio looks like a template in today's world. If that is the case, how do you differentiate? You differentiate fundamentally with your communication, clarity of thought. That's number one. Second thing, your understanding of business and technology and how you deliver value in that. These two things that people can start demonstrating as early as part of their work, then you are gold for any company.